Hey everybody, today I've got something cool to share with you. This is the Werra camera from the DDR. Yeah, that's East Germany. This thing was manufactured at the height of the Cold War, and I was absolutely blown away when it showed up. This is the Werra camera, and it is named after a small river, the Werra River. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, but this was made in East Germany from the 1950s to the 1960s. There are many models. This one, with the features that it has, looks to be the Werra 2B, and that would be around 1962, 1963. And it is a beautiful camera. When I bought it, I was expecting to get some kind of clunky Soviet-era Eastern kludgy kind of thing, but that's not what arrived. What arrived is a beautiful example of Bauhaus design. Bauhaus design came from Weimar in Germany in 1919, and the Bauhaus School of Design is all about simplicity, function, geometric shapes, things like that. And that is what this camera expresses from end to end. Everything about it, everything is hidden. It's meant to be seen as a piece of art. One of the first things I noticed was that its similarity to the Rollei 35. And that makes an awful lot of sense. These are both German cameras. They both have lenses manufactured in the same factory. This camera has a 50mm f2.8 Tessar lens made by Zeiss at their factory in Jena, spelled J-E-N-A. The camera itself may have been manufactured at the same factory, although I've seen another source say that the cameras were manufactured at another place called Eisfeld, which is, it looks like if you go to Leipzig and go 1 hour southwest, you'll get to Jena, and go 1 more hour southwest, you'll end up in Eisfeld. May or may not be true, but that was my guess when I looked at the map. The camera weighs about 600 grams, and the original cost would have been, it's kind of hard when you're looking at something sold in the 1950s, 1960s from Eastern Germany, but one website said that there was one model sold in 1962 for around $80. And if you put that in an inflation converter and turn the crank, you'll get just over $800 today in 2025 dollars. And that explains why it's so well built. This is a mechanical marvel. This does not use batteries. There's nothing electronic in this, save for the light meter and the wiring for the light meter, as well as the wiring for the flash socket here. But there's no battery, none of that. I went on Friday and shot several photos, but before we get to those, let's get up close with the camera and let me show you its features. This is the Werra camera, and it really is a beautiful example of Bauhaus design. Simplicity. There's no screws. Look at that. How do you open it up? The controls are very discreetly hidden. It looks very graceful. There's a shutter release button up here, and that's about it. On the bottom, you get a hint that there may be something going on, but otherwise, we have this lens thing here. And let's just get that out of the way. I'm going to show you something really cool that this does. This comes right off, and there's the lens. We take this little thing off the end. And turn this lens cap around. And it becomes a perfect lens hood that you always have with you. Now that we have the lens exposed, we can see a little bit more of what's going on. We have on the front. This is your focus ring. It has meters on the top, and on the front, it has feet. And yes, I screwed that up a couple times and got a blurry photo because I was measuring using my laser tape measure, and I read, say, 5 feet, and I dialed in 5 meters. So keep that in mind when you're picking which scale you're going to use. Just looking at this camera right as it is, it's not clear how you advance the film and how you cock the shutter. Let me show you. See this leatherette ring? You just twist it like that. Continuing on the lens, we have a shutter speed dial. It's kind of on this one it's a little stiff, but you see we control the shutter speed with this inner dial. The next one out is aperture. And it's kind of an odd thing. The shutter speeds are listed here with very slow speeds, which it makes no sense because this camera does not shoot at those speeds. It doesn't shoot at 15 seconds or something like that. But what that is really when you have selected your aperture, now you've got the numbers side by side, shutter speed and aperture, and the camera is letting you see all the other combinations that'll give you the same exposure. That's why there are those long exposure ones at the low end of the scale there. Going around on the aperture dial, there's this kind of challenging little metal thing that's, you got to get a fingernail in it to move it. That's your ISO, otherwise known as ASA, and there's like a DIN or something like that, because this was made in Germany and they used DIN instead of ASA, but that's how you set that. And if you have an ISO setting on an old camera, it means there's a light meter, because you don't need ISO if you're not measuring the light. And as we see on the front, we have a selenium light meter. This is one of those ones that over time wears out. And this one seems to be functioning more or less. It's not giving me accurate readings, but it actually works. And there's a little window up here that the light comes in that shows the needle. The needle is actually displayed inside the viewfinder. So there's like prisms and stuff inside there that are showing you the position of the needle. The viewfinder on this camera is something special, and it's really hard for me to photograph the viewfinder, so I'm going to have to show you what it looks like in somebody else's picture. There's 2 really important things about the viewfinder that impressed me. One of them is the lines are crisp and clean. They're black lines, hair lines. It's so nice compared to all these rather, the ones that have the reflective lines in them that we're so used to seeing. In this camera, when you look through the viewfinder, you see this really crisp frame in black, and it's really nice. The second thing that impressed me about the camera is there's a little prism right here that shows you the current setting of shutter speed and aperture. So if you've set it at, in this case, 1/60th of a second, and f8, you look in the viewfinder, you're going to see prominently in the lower right corner 1/60th and f8. To me, that's a huge advance, because I always put old cameras to my eye and I forget, oh yeah, I've got to set the shutter speed, or oh, I got to choose that. Did I change it from the last shot? Oh, darn. And I end up with shots that are over or underexposed because I forgot that I was in direct sunlight a few minutes ago and now I just walked into the shade or something like that. But having it right there in the viewfinder is really nice. If you want to take this apart, it turns out that you have to remove these little lugs that hold the strap rings. That's how you take it apart. There's the PC socket for controlling flash. But now let's take a look at some of the hidden things. If we flip the camera over, we see a little lever that sticks out here, and it's got 3 positions. It's marked M, X, and V. The M position is for flash bulbs, so that's going to set the timing of the signal for the flash to be earlier so that the flash bulb is warmed up by the time the shutter opens. Whereas if you put it on X, that's going to be for electronic flash, so it's only going to give the signal when the shutter is wide open. And that's what we want to use all the time. You never want to use them. Nobody uses flash bulbs anymore. The 3rd position is V. I didn't know what that was. And then I set that, cocked the camera, and fired the shutter, and I heard clockwork. And you're never supposed to use a self-timer, but on this camera, the self-timer is working perfectly. I'm really impressed that over all these years, these decades, even the self-timer is working just fine. Now, we're going to look at the other things you see on the bottom. There's a frame counter with the one single visible screw, and it's hard to see that. I think I need to put a little dot of maybe some white or something in there to see the arrow. We have, of course, a tripod mount, and then here's the rewind, if I can get that open. Nice. And finally, we have the button that unlocks the sprocket inside so you can rewind the film. One thing that's a little bit challenging with this camera is that button does not lock. We're so used to press the button in and click, and then you can rewind. This one, you have to hold the button in, and I've got these big fat fingertips, and it's kind of hard to get my finger in this deep depression as I'm winding the film. As I was reading the instructions, I read something talking about a built-in diopter adjustment for the viewfinder. And I looked at my camera and said, oh, well, I guess I didn't have that feature, because there's many versions of the Werra camera. But then I twisted this ring, and sure enough, all you do is twist this knurled ring around the eyepiece, and that adjusts the diopter. And so I was able to adjust that to my eyesight. This camera shows polish and attention to detail through and through. Now, the Werra camera looks suspiciously like a Rollei 35. It's a little bit chunkier. In fact, it's a lot chunkier. This camera is thick with 2 C's, but it has a lot of the DNA in it. You can see the same design elements. And in fact, loading the Werra camera is very similar to loading the Rollei 35. We look on the bottom and we see this little ring here, and we rotate that counterclockwise. Then the bottom slides off, the whole back, just like many rangefinder cameras from the mid-century era. You want to set this back somewhere where it's not going to be squashed. This camera loads almost exactly like a Rollei 35. The film goes from right to left, so the photos on the negatives are actually going to be upside down from the way you traditionally expect them to be if you develop your own film. The way you want to load this is there is a spring steel sleeve that's around this roller here, and you take your film and you simply tuck the end under that spring steel and you stuff it in there just like that. Now you can bring the film across, get it in place, and you can use this little knurled section to crank the film over a little tiny bit. And now you grab the back, and just like a Rollei 35, you line the rails up, slide it, and now you're going to twist that little knurled ring clockwise. There's a little dot that shows you the position, but you'll feel it's counterclockwise to take it off and clockwise to put it back on, just like a screw. And now the camera is loaded, and they say to do 2 blank frames. So 1, 2. And you'll feel that the resistance to this crank is substantial. It's much more than when you're just shooting it dry. And that wasn't an issue. Some people have had problems with these where I think they had issues, maybe one that wasn't in good condition, where the film wasn't advancing or something like that, and the sprockets would tear. This one is in perfect condition. When you're done, the camera, as usual, is going to stop partway through cranking it. And what you'll do is turn it over, press that little button, flip the rewind lever up, and let's see. Ah, yeah, there is. There's a little arrow on the edge. So follow the arrow, and let's roll it around. And I heard the film come off the end. There, we're good to go. Now I'm going to open the back, slide it off, take out my film, put the back on, and tighten it. Needless to say, this camera is a bit of a faff to load when you're outside walking around and you're reaching your bag to get some film, and it's just not an easy camera to load in the field. With that said, it's a fun camera. I had a great time shooting with it. And there we go. Before I took this camera out shooting on Friday, I wanted to make sure everything was functioning correctly. So I got out my shutter tester, and let me show you how that worked out. Move the lens out as far as it can go. We'll put this light source on the end. We're going to go with a shutter test and a leaf shutter. And then you just put this sensor up to the back of the camera and fire the shutter. And what happens is this light is going to be picked up by the sensor. And so let's set this at 1/60th of a second, and we'll see if we get a good measurement. It says 1/57th. It claims it needs a little bit less light. I don't know, we'll drop it down a little bit. There. 1/57th of a second. Let's go to the higher speeds. Let's try 1/250th. Crack the shutter. You can't ask for better than that. 1/250th of a second. The speeds on this camera are spot on all across the board. This shutter in these cameras was one of the best shutters you could get. This goes up to 1/750th of a second. Kind of odd because it's missing the 1/500th of a second. So if you're going in full stop increments, you're going to be missing that when you try to go from 250 to 500. But it works out in the end. Pretty neat. On Friday, I went out shooting and I had a great time. I met some random guy in the park who had a big Great Dane that he called Mac and Cheese. What a cool name for a dog. The dog was super friendly. And I gotta say, whenever I go out in the park or wherever and I'm taking photos, many of the people I meet just look straight through me or completely ignore my existence. And I'm sure this is not just a New Jersey thing. This is just the way people are. And so it's refreshing when I run across somebody who is open and engaging and introduced me to his dog. That was kind of cool. So, hey, dude with a dog named Mac and Cheese, you're really cool. You made my day. Yesterday, I spent much of the day in the darkroom, and I did a few darkroom prints. I did some 5x7s, and then I did some 8x10s. And let me show you how they turned out. One of the first shots of the day, I actually picked up my classical guitar and asked my wife to shoot the photo. It was a bit tricky because, again, this camera does not have any way of focusing other than to just guessing it has a focusing scale. And so I use, let me see what I've got right here. I use this digital tape measure to measure the distance, and then I dial that in on the lens. And so I had to measure the distance from me to my wife, and then tell her, oh, move back, because I'd already said, say 5 feet or whatever. I said, move back a little forward, a little bit. Ah, there you go. And then I set everything down and posed. And this is the photo I got. I was really happy. The camera focused perfectly on my eyes, and everything else was out of focus just the way I was hoping. Just what a beautiful lens. And as I was walking through the park, I took a few other photos of things that were really cool. Like, here's this. Look at this twisted log, this tree that fell down in the woods and was twisted and had snow on it. It was pretty cool. Here's another cool tree I found in the woods. This one's covered in people's initials. It's all over the thing. People have carved their initials in it. So that was a kind of a fun find. And my favorite shot of the day is this one right here. Look at that. Beautiful, the wood, the snow on top of it. I was really happy. Again, the lens on this camera did miracles. This thing is a really nice camera. It is a piece of art. Everything about it is smooth. It's amazing. I expected mediocrity, and I received German precision. If you find a Werra camera for a good price, snap it up. You'll have fun. That's all I've got for you today. This was a fun camera to shoot, and I, again, was totally not expecting it to be as awesome as it is. Thank you for watching. Now, go out and shoot a roll.